As we marvel at the great unknown throughout the universe, we now find ourselves at the dawn of the next logical phase of humanity's desire for exploration, surviving permanently in space. And although we've traveled great distances in the past, we've never had to contend with the challenges of long-term space travel and its effects on the human mind and body. These challenges will test the very limits of our medical, biological, and psychological abilities. As we look to the future, we rely on the courage and pioneering spirit of so many dedicated science heroes to make our dreams of tomorrow a reality today. Our biggest challenges are food, behavioral health, medical autonomy, and radiation.
Food, such an emotional component.
It is an emotional component.
To not be satiated by food is a very human need. When you go back to like biology, and how disruptive not having your needs met.
Space food is, when we started the shuttle program, we had come a little ways from the tubes that they had in the early days. You know, you saw those pictures where, we had mostly dehydrated food. It was very much like camping food. I mean, I've done a lot of backpacking, and so I'm used to that kind of food. It's not great, but as I say, hunger is the best cook.
There was an interest for some of the early missions to the moon to have long duration EVAs and have some kind of high nutrient food bars that crew members could eat to keep them going. And our team stood up to that and created them, but they failed the taste test.
We are not meant to necessarily eat food processed in that way for that long of a time. And there is also evidence an inappropriate diet may increase your risk of a variety of different conditions. We know a good diet is important for protecting ourselves against coming against some of these risks. It has to be important for our considerations for astronauts that are going to be going into deep space without resupply, without access to fresh vegetables.
So the Advanced Plant Habitat is one of two systems on the International Space Station that is designed to grow plants in space. This is called a quadrant. We send it up with just the seeds in here, and then the astronauts plug it into the system. It waters it, and then the seeds germinate, and the plants grow. And so the goal of our experiment is to grow the tomato plants until they produce tomato fruit, and then have the astronauts harvest the seeds, and then replant them, and then do the next round.
We're moving towards a future where it's a self-sustaining system. You eat, you harvest, you replant, you keep growing. That sustainability is an interesting concept.
All the nutrition and everything you need just to have the energy to have your body work properly. It starts there because it's what you take in, and
it's your fuel.
It's your fuel. And so if your fuel is not as efficient or is not palatable in the sense that you now want to eat more or enough because you're tired of eating the same granola bar for a month, you're going to eat less of it, or you're going to eat just enough, and then now you're not working optimally because you don't have the energy you need, you don't have the nutrition you need. So to me, the food system is important.
Eating and drinking can be a challenge. When I first started eating on space station, we loved to sit around the table or float around the table in Node 1 and chit chat and talk about the day and our families. Early on, I wasn't involved in those conversations. I was just focused on eating and not choking, because it's so easy to drink something and have little bits floating near you, and you got to make sure you get it all down before you start talking, because there could be droplets there, waiting to choke you up. So again, space flight takes concentration.
And I just wasn't a really big meat person, and I knew that my Russian crewmates really loved meat. And so I'd be like, hey, my barbecue beef, you want that? You want my steak? I mean, sometimes, okay, I would actually use that. Like, so you have that exercise time, and I would like that exercise time, and I have an extra steak.
Before every dinner, I would have shrimp cocktail. Not because the shrimp were great. They were dehydrated shrimp, and they had the consistency and taste of kind of cardboard, but they were packed in a really spicy horseradish sauce, which would open up my nasal passages so I could actually smell my food.
And some things that were really nice: refried beans, Refried beans were nice because they were easy. You could just take them out, slap them on a tortilla or a cracker, and they taste good. They were nice, salty, but they also are good for sticking other things too. So they were like food glue, and they just worked out really nice. Very convenient for weightlessness.
It's going to have to be something very different, I think, than what we do now on the space station. We resupply to the station. You know, every couple months there's big boxes of new food coming. That's not happening on the way to Mars, right? So what we take is what we're going to have with us. I think we have to revolutionize the food system. I really and truly do. And that's not just from the shape, form, presentation of the food. It's also from the nutritional aspect of the food. And I see it extending beyond what some of these gastrochemistry chefs are doing down here on Earth now, where you go into these restaurants and there's smells being piped in, there's colors that change in the room, so that when this plate arrives that's like the size of a little saucer and it's got this foaming thing and this little piece of a chip of something and whatever, and that's your whole meal that you just probably paid more for than you would at any restaurant you've ever gone to. And then you eat it, and it's the most delicious thing you've ever experienced. And you don't know why, because normally you have a plate that's this big and it's got, if you eat meat, it's got the meat and the potato and the vegetable and the dessert on the side and all of these things that we try now on the space station to accommodate in those little silver pouches.
Your body is an incredibly energy efficient machine. So not only are you not working against gravity, 20 hours a day or 16 hours a day vertically, there's just no demand of gravity whatsoever.
So the caloric requirements are actually lower in zero-G?
Absolutely not.
Are we actually tracking the caloric intake?
There have been several attempts at it. It's not as easy in a precise manner, clearly in space, that it is on the ground, where you would need like a lot of gas exchange and really micromanage input and output. But there have been studies that have measured food consumption and then changes in body mass over time to understand how do we calculate it.
You don't go into space to have a 3-star gourmet Michelin meal, okay?
Right.
You eat to live, but variety is important.
When they got to grow things, it was a real psychological boost to watch these plants grow, and they became part of the family, and people would go and look at the plants grow. So it's not just for eating, but it's also for for cultural and for behavioral health purposes, to have fresh foods aboard. And some of the nutrients that you get from fresh foods, you're not going to be able to probably maintain for very long periods of time.
You're intrinsically relying on a crop to meet not only a caloric need, but a micronutrient need, and that crop fails.
Yeah, you're
it's devastating.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so for a while, we need to learn that in a safe place, like low Earth orbit, lunar orbit, lunar surface, to work through the troubleshooting, to make the failures that allow us to make the big gains.
The current food system used by the space program works, but to keep humans healthy on the moon and eventually on Mars, a revolutionary new way to maintain, supply, and provide the proper nutrients for people has to be developed.
Mental toughness is more important than physical toughness and conditioning, and team cohesion is just critical, because look, you do feel differently the moment you get on orbit. It's instantaneous. You're not the same person. That doesn't mean you can't function and be happy and have good morale, but you are different. Your feelings are different, and it stays like that for, well, at least it did for the 3 days I was on orbit.
You not only have to get along with each other during the space flight, you also have to bond as a crew early on, and you have to go through innumerable hours of training together. If you don't get along before the flight, you're not going to get along during the flight. It's kind of like, knowing someone before you get married. If you don't get along before that time, you're probably not going to get along after you get married.
The area that I continue to worry the most about with spaceflight participants came up during this study, and that was anxiety. It was very difficult to predict who was going to have anxiety based on their pre-screening. They did not come up with a good method to pre-screen for anxiety.
Did you ever talk to your family members about their feelings when you were gone?
it's a hard conversation to have. You almost dread that as much as the launch, is that conversation you need to have with your kids that I think it's going to be all right, but there's a real danger here. And it's not something that's pleasant to talk about when you're talking about someone that you love, and it's difficult to say goodbye. I think that anyone that says that they don't have fear when they go out to the launch pad is either not telling the truth or there's something wrong with them mentally. I think all of us had educated fear. Educated in the sense that we trained and we tried to overcome fear, but we knew that there was danger there.
Look, if sitting on top of 4.5 million pounds of high explosive causes you undue emotional stress, maybe you're in the wrong profession, you know.
Humor is a really important thing. I've been on crews where there wasn't enough of it, and I've been on crews where you just want to tell the guy to shut up because he was telling jokes when the countdown was at 10, and he was still down there in the mid-deck telling jokes. And so, humor at the right point is really helpful. I tend to be one that likes more humor than less. I think that if you get totally serious about something, you can't be a little bit lighthearted about it. It's difficult to deal with danger even, I think, if you don't have a kind of a lighthearted look at it.
Yeah, I show a picture in my presentations it's a crew picture from Expedition 21, and we've got Guy La Liberté, who is the owner, founder of Cirque du Soleil, who traveled as a spaceflight participant. He was there for 10 days with us. So we're all in our blue, kind of fancy flight suits, and we're all floating in different directions, heads all coming together, some coming up down. And we're, flashing the peace sign, and we've got clown noses on. It's one of my very favorite pictures from space because I think it shows that total mix of what you want to have in the best kind of cruise.
One very important thing I learned about while living in space is that all the preparation you can do, there are some things you can never prepare for, and you have to have solid fundamentals, but you also have to learn there's a better and more effective way to adapt, and there's a way to adapt or do things on the fly that's unprepared and not going to be very good for you. So knowing everything you can about the environment, but also respecting the environment enough to know I've never spent exposed time in 1/3 gravity. So when I get there, I'm going to have to adapt what I do and how I use my equipment.
Tell me what you think has been the progress that's been made, at least in sensory motor research, as you've seen it from a deep perspective of knowing the field.
It's affected by a whole bunch of different things, right? The most obvious thing is gravity. We have evolved in a gravitational environment. We have sensors in our inner ears, we have sensors on our butts, we have sensors on our feet, we have sensors on our arms that tell us where down is all the time, right? And when that disappears, then it confuses the brain.
They always flew a treadmill. Sometimes they flew a bicycle ergometer. I have to say, I'm not generally a runner. I like to ride a bike, I roller skate. Now, to run on a treadmill when you're weightless, you have to put on a harness with bungee cords to pull yourself down so that you have some, basically a force on you. Otherwise, you can't really run on the treadmill.
Eventually, you adapt to that. We're very plastic systems that are adaptive, and you can adapt to that. But during that adaptation time frame, things like spatial orientation, which way is up, get confusing. How to locomote. In 0G, you don't have to worry much about that. You're pushing off things. Although at the beginning, people push a little too hard, and they push themselves quickly across the vehicle. But then after the transition coming back, if they're in space long enough to adapt to the 0G environment, then they have to relearn how to do things on Earth.
And things also can go wrong, and you're a lot farther away from help and the comforts of 1G. So I think that being in the right frame of mind, being able to persevere through uncomfortable, I'd say, would be situations, and still be happy and productive is just paramount, especially, when you're not, hours away from coming home, but, potentially months away from coming home.
The thing I miss the most is dinners around the table, either on the Russian segment or in the US segment, when we would have a dinner with the entire crew and just sharing food, laughing, singing songs, making funny videos, just telling jokes, talking about TV shows the same things that we would do if we were on Earth. but also because it was the pandemic on Earth, we were all so longing for that. You know, we launched in November of 2020, and so there weren't vaccines yet. We were still masked and distanced, and so to get to ISS, everyone being healthy and being able to actually be together physically was just so great and so welcome. And that is a huge part of the mental well-being that you get on station.
The point is, I think that astronauts are people. I mean, we're not robots. We have our culture. We take our culture with us. And some things we can do like we do on Earth, and some things we can't.
Long-duration stays on the Moon, and eventually on Mars, will absolutely challenge the mental resilience of humans in extraordinary ways.
Ultrasound is very flammable because it's not heavy, it's not taking a lot of power, it's easy to operate, and finally, we have experience flying it. We've flown 8 ultrasound devices over years, before even the space station.
Your traditional ultrasound devices have a piezoelectric crystal that forms the transducer of the ultrasound machine, the ultrasound head, and they typically have with like 128 elements on average for a lot of the different probes. So they're fairly limited, and they have a very fixed shape. So you have the curved probes, the linear probes, and they're tuned for different frequencies. So they have different depth capabilities. You can either scan something that's shallow or something that's deep. What's unique about this technology that Butterfly has come up with or has developed and commercialized is it's all ultrasound on a chip. So they have micro transducers on a chip. There are 9,000 elements on the face of this
This is the
probe.
same chip that would go into what kind of devices today?
It's unique. It's designed specifically to produce and receive ultrasound.
But an equivalent of what would go into your smartphone, your smartwatch?
Essentially, yeah.
Very small.
It's a silicon chip. Well, it covers the face of the probe. All the elements are on the probe, but there are 9,000 elements as opposed to a couple hundred that might be on a typical probe. So, and they're all individually tunable. So, because of that, they can produce a linear probe that scans at very shallow depths, or a cardiac probe that scans at very deep depths, or you can have a curved probe for like an abdominal type probe that you would have. They can do all of that with a single probe.
What does Level X do? We advance the practice of medicine through play. We make games for doctors. What does that? People raise an eyebrow. What does that mean, games for doctors, right? What if we actually put together a team of top video game designers, artists, engineers from across the industry, team them up with, hundreds of physician advisors across every major specialty, and actually put them on the challenge of capturing the practice of medicine and the challenges of the practice of medicine as video games? You can actually have really broad impact. All we have to do for microgravity is just set that number to 0.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden what starts happening is the fluids will start behaving like it's 0 gravity.
And we see that in astronauts, as you know.
Exactly.
And the beauty of that is that you could set it to a 6th gravity on the Moon. You could set it to roughly 3rd gravity for Mars. And so we can actually practice procedures on Moon, Mars, 0, anywhere we want to go.
Exactly.
We've also been working on what we call a gastric resident device. So basically, this is a pill that you can take. It goes inside you, and frankly, I love to think about it as like this tiny little spaceship that goes inside your gut, and it deploys similar to the way you would imagine that a satellite is sent up to space, and then it has to deploy its little wings. And so, in the same way, we have these pills that go inside us. They open up, and so what that allows them to do is they get kind of stuck in your stomach. And they stay there for an extended period of time. And, we're looking to the time scales of beyond a week up to multiple months, and in some cases, maybe even a year. And so these little kind of like star pills that we've made allow people to remember that one time, take them, and then the little device in their stomach takes care of sort of diffusing out the drugs on the correct schedule.
With no medical support from Earth, future crews will be provided with the tools needed to contend with common ailments, as well as more serious concerns that arise because of the stressors of spaceflight.
So radiation is one of the
the highest level risk that we have, and because there is a fair amount of uncertainty. Space radiation is different from the radiation you get on the planet, and the reason is that we have this wonderful geomagnetosphere that surrounds us that protects us from a lot of the incoming radiation, whether it be from the sun or from the GCR, galactic cosmic radiation, which are typically outburst from supernova and things, pulsars, quasars. And that's the radiation we're afraid of because we know it's higher energy and it has higher potential biologic effect than the radiation you would get, say, from getting a chest x-ray or a CT scan, or natural radiation like radon that you get in the household.
But GCR, from a biological standpoint, we're really trying to understand it. And it's dangerous. There's no doubt about it. And it's almost impossible to shield.
There's a whole world of new approaches to handling the effects of radiation. The problem with shielding is it's very good up to a certain level, but with these very high energy particles, the galactic cosmic rays, as they impact the shielding, they get slowed by it, but also they cause other particles to be emitted from the shield themselves. And above a certain thickness of shielding, new particles get created that have just as much potential effect on crew members as the old particles you're trying to shield.
We genetically edited in a bunch of different factors so far, probably 20 or 25 that are known factors that promote the health of the stem cell. So we're very excited to now test their efficacy in either preventing or therapeutically treating the damage that we're seeing from exposure to the proton beam.
Right, to radiation.
Yeah, and these are all being done with these organoid cultures that we're growing from the patient-derived stem cells.
The factors that you're genetically engineering these bacteria to make, they're normal factors. They're not strange, weird things. The body already makes them, but you're making them in a way that's over and above what's normal, normally there.
Right, and so we're hoping that if we deliver a little extra oomph from the outside via this microbial component, that we'll be able to sort of protect that environment from those DNA damage breaks that are coming from the radiation.
Each crew member will have their own personal dosimeter. So we will have, from the measurement of physical dose, each crew member should have their own way of doing that. Wherever you go, you would have a personal dosimeter that was actively counting and actively able to provide you with some sort of feedback of what your dose is.
So just for people to understand, the active dosimetry gives you real-time measurements.
Real time.
As opposed to just wearing something, if you're a nuclear worker, that just collects it over time, and once a month they come and check you.
Right, and you turn your badge in and they make a reading.
And you have no idea what you got over the time. So you need active real-time.
Active personal dosimetry.
Okay.
I think that's key.
We need to spend a lot of time thinking about those tan bodies inside the spacecraft. I'm 45, I've got, 1 adult children and 3 teenagers at home. But we have young astronauts who are still in their early family and development stages and that may want to have kids. We need to think so much more about that. We need to think about how we do that better on a ground-based sense and for a group of human space flyers.
We cannot completely shield against radiation in deep space, and the longer the exposure, the more damage to the humans. Trish is developing unique approaches to make humans more resilient to space radiation. The challenge of keeping humans healthy in space propels us to innovate in ways that continue to enhance how we live here on Earth.